Welcome, and thank you for standing by. Your lines have been placed in a listen-only mode for today's presentation. The call is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I will now introduce your conference host, Ms. Shannon McKay. You may begin.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Shannon McKay, and I'm the Program Manager for the Financial Strategies and Research Unit at the CDFI Fund. And I'm joined today by
Michelle Dickens, the Program Manager for the Office of Certification Policy and Evaluation.
Erin St. Peter, Research Analyst for the Financial Strategies and Research Unit.
Mike Smackey, a Data Analyst with the Office of Certification Policy and Evaluation.
So welcome to the second webinar related to the revised CDFI certification application and certification policies. Today, we're going to provide an overview of the changes to the revised certification applications related tools, specifically the annual certification and data collection report and the transaction level report. We plan to hold more webinars throughout the first half of 2024 to discuss specific application and tools related questions. All participants will be muted during this webinar. Please put your questions in the chat function on your screen. We may not be able to answer all questions today, but once we finish the presentation, we will go through the questions and answer as many of them as we can. And we may use some of your questions to draft additional FAQs that we will publish in the coming months. Also, very importantly, please send your questions in via AMIS service request. The information on how to do that is on the last slide. With the opening of the application, the Certification and Research and Strategies and Financial Strategies and Research Unit have staff dedicated to reviewing and answering your questions. Next slide. During this presentation, we will give a high-level overview of the requirements for CDFI certification as reflected in the revised CDFI certification application and its related tools, the Annual Certification and Data Collection Report, or ACR, and the Abbreviated Transaction Level Report, or TLR. The CDFI Fund has been developing revisions for CDFI certification for several years now, and these final revised documents come after the Office of Management and Budget, also known as OMB, published the proposed revisions to the application in November of 2022 for a final round of public comment. Separately, at around the same time, OMB released our proposed modifications to the revised ACR and abbreviated TLR for a final round of public comment. The ACR and TLR are information collection tools related to the CDFI certification application that are used to maintain a CDFI certification and gather data. After conducting a thorough review of all the comments received, the CDFI Fund made further revisions to the CDFI certification application, the ACR, and the abbreviated TLR to provide greater transparency and clarity around the criteria that entities must meet to obtain, maintain, and measure CDFI certification. In December, we held a webinar delving into the CDFI certification application. So today, our focus is on the ACR and the TLR. Next slide. As a preview, during this presentation, we will provide background on the CDFI Fund and Community Development Financial Institutions, discuss the CDFI certification and our review of certification policy, and review the revised Transaction Level Report, TLR, and the Annual Certification Report, ACR, as well as provide additional information. Next slide.
To begin with, the CDFI Fund's mission is to expand economic opportunities for underserved people and communities by supporting the growth and capacity of a national network of community development lenders, investors, and financial service providers. Next slide. And our mission is our vision is an America in which all people and communities have access to the investment capital and financial services they need to prosper. Next slide, please. While initially authorized under the Regal Community Development and Regulatory Improvement Act of 1994, the CDFI Fund manages 9 separate programs authorized through 6 different statutes, which I won't read out loud because they are listed here for your review later. Next slide. What most of these statutes and programs do is allow the CDFI fund to certify entities that want to be recognized as CDFI and to provide resources to those entities along with community development mission-driven organizations. So what is the CDFI? For anyone viewing who is not already familiar, CDFIs are community-based financing entities that expand economic opportunity in low-income communities and provide financial products and services to individuals and businesses often underserved by traditional financial institutions. They include banks, credit unions, loan funds, and venture capital funds, and they do all the things that most mainstream financial institutions do. They help families finance their first homes, support small and startup businesses, establish and rebuild credit histories, and invest in local health, education, and community facilities, as well as provide financial services and training. Next slide, please. Now we will discuss CDFI certification and the CDFI fund's review of the certification policy. Next slide. As mentioned, the CDFI fund is responsible for certifying CDFIs, which is a requirement for participating in most of our programs. For the purpose of certification, the CDFI fund verifies that an organization meets the certification requirements through a series of validations and tests in the certification application, which is a standardized application form submitted through our Awards Management Information System, or AMIS. Once certified, CDFIs are required to confirm on an annual basis that they continue to meet certification requirements, as well as report on their yearly lending and investment activity through the submission of their ACR. Next slide. To become certified as a CDFI, an organization must demonstrate through the application that it meets the following statutory, regulatory, and administrative requirements in advance of the submission of an application. First, it must be a legal entity. It must have a primary mission of promoting community development. It must be a financing entity that primarily serves one or more target markets and provides development services in conjunction with those financing activities. It must maintain accountability to the defined target market, and it must be a non-government entity, and with the exception of tribal governments, must not be under the control of any government entity. Next slide. So over the past 2 decades, CDFIs have evolved in scope, scale, and sophistication. The number of certified CDFIs have grown from 196 in 1997, when the first certifications were issued, to nearly 1,500 today. And the total assets held by CDFIs have grown to more than $300 billion. CDFI certification has become a brand in itself and a qualifier not just for CDFI fund resources, but for other federal, state, and local government, as well as private sector programs and benefits. And the types of CDFI financial products and financial services have expanded and have used the use of technology to increase market reach. Next slide, please. Given these changes to the industry and to the significance of the CDFI certification, the CDFI Fund undertook its review of the standards for certification and the CDFI certification application that reflects those standards to ensure they remain appropriate to the evolving nature of CDFIs and sufficiently protect government resources. This review has made us take a look with an eye towards making revisions that would ensure that CDFI financing activities are consistent with a mission of promoting community development and support the growth and reach of CDFIs. especially as it relates to the ability to innovate and take advantage of new technologies. It will continue to foster a diversity of CDFI types, activities, and geographies, minimize administrative burden on CDFIs while improving data quality and collection methods, and promote the efficiency for CDFI fund staff in rendering CDFI certification determinations. Next slide, please. Our review considered comments that received based on multiple opportunities for public input, beginning with a request for information published in January 2017 that sought comments on the then current CDFI certification policies and procedures. We received 28 comment letters in response to that RFI, and after thoroughly reviewing those comments, developed an initial draft of a revised CDFI certification application, the ACR, and a TLR that was released in May of 2020. Next slide, please. Stakeholders responded to that publication with 55 comment letters, which we then spent nearly 2 years reviewing and adjudicating before making additional revisions to the application and sending those over to OMB for publication, and one more round of comments in November of 2022. OMB then published the revised ACR and abbreviated TLR for a final round of comments in December of 2022. This time, we received a total of 275 letters with comments on the application and an additional 40 letters on the ACR and abbreviated TLR. Again, the CDFI Fund thoroughly reviewed and considered all of the comments we received and made further substantive revisions to the CDFI certification application, the ACR, and the abbreviated TLR before submitting them to OMB for final approval. Next slide, please.
We will now turn to the topic of changes to the ACR and TLR resulting from the revised certification application and certification policy. Next slide. We will begin with the transaction level report. At a high level, the fund has historically used the transaction level report, or TLR for short, as our data collection tool for award compliance and research. CDFI and NACA Financial Assistance Award recipients have completed and submitted TLR annually for years now as required through their assistance agreement. For the past 2 years, CDFI Rapid Response, also known as RRP recipients, have as well, and the CDFI Equitable Recovery Program, ERP recipients, will begin to later this year. The TLR collects financial product origination activity at the transaction level. Next slide. In order to accomplish its new purpose related to CDFI certification, the fund has taken the original CDFI NACA data collection form, which asks questions about the features of the financial product origination itself, such as purpose, interest rate, term, guarantees, as well as the borrower investee and what outcomes will be achieved, such as number of housing units, community facility capacity, and so on, and shortened it to create the abbreviated TLR. The abbreviated TLR is comprised of those data fields which the fund has deemed as necessary in order to allow the fund to evaluate the extent to which CDFI certification applicants and certified CDFIs are serving their proposed and approved target markets respectively. The abbreviated TLR is completed by all new CDFI certification applicants. All CDFIs that were certified as of December 20th, 2023, and do not have an active assistance agreement, I'll repeat that, do not have an active assistance agreement for a CDFI program, NACA program, CDFI ERP, or CDFI RRP award, and are planning on seeking to be recertified under the revised certification application, are required to complete and submit an abbreviated TLR as part of the application submission. An organization that is no longer certified but still has an active assistance agreement. I'll say that again. An organization no longer certified but still has an active assistance agreement for the CDFI program, NACA program, CDFI ERP or CDFI RRP award with a TLR requirement, and is seeking to become recertified under the revised certification application, they complete and submit the full-length TLR as part of the application submission. All CDFIs that were certified as of December 20th, 2023, and have an active assistance agreement for the CDFI program, NACA program, CDFI ERP, or CDFI RRP award, and are planning on seeking to be recertified under the revised certification application, are required to complete and submit the full-length TLR as part of the application submission. Next slide. The current TLR form, which is known as the CDFI NACA RRP TLR, or the full-length TLR, as we discussed earlier, has been historically used for compliance and research purposes only. It can have up to 2 components, depending on your financial institution type and the purpose of the financial product transaction. The main component is the TLR, but if you are a bank or credit union that has originated consumer loans, then you must complete the Consumer Loan Report, also known as the CLR. Consumer loans are reported aggregated at the census tract level in the CLR, and if you are approved to serve an OTP as part of your target market, then you provide the count and dollar amount for OTPs as a whole rather than on each specific OTP type. Under the new TLR design, as previously discussed, we will have an abbreviated TLR, but that's not the only change to the TLR. The TLR is going to be used to determine compliance with target market activity, both proposed through the certification application process and thereafter annually as part of the annual certification and data collection report submission process, where certified CDFIs report on annual financial product and service activity in their approved target market. Applicants and certified CDFIs will have to decide on a final target market component tag for a transaction. This final target market tag is what will be used in the calculation of target market percentages for the application in ACR. It is the responsibility of the organization to tell the fund which target market component that the transaction is qualifying under when one or more are applicable to it. There is a new transaction purpose for climate-centered financing. This addition aligns with the tracking of climate-centered financing, which we have done through the ACR for several reporting rounds now. On the consumer loan TLR for regulated entities, organizations must report count and dollar amounts for individual OTP categories now, rather than an aggregated total OTP category if they have a proposed or approved OTP target market component. There are also 2 new tables or objects in AMIS, as AMIS calls them, financial services and loan purchases. Financial services is only applicable to financial institutions that meet a criteria involving regulated status and certain target market percentages for financial products. The financial services table will capture information on unique depository account holders. In the past, the TLR did not capture loan purchases. Now, all loan purchases, whether from a certified CDFI or not, are to be reported. The fund has approved an OTP target market component specific to certified CDFI. Next slide. The table on this slide presents the 29 data fields that make up the abbreviated TLR. 27 of these data fields were previously collected through the full-length version of the TLR. The 2 new fields are designated target market type and climate-centered purpose, which is only in the abbreviated TLR at this time. The designated target market type captures the final target market tag associated with a transaction as determined by the applicant or certified CDFI. The climate-centered purpose data field is there to capture information on those transactions where climate-centered financing is not the main purpose of a transaction, but secondary or related in some degree. While the abbreviated TLR consists of 29 data fields, not all of the data fields are applicable to every transaction. Further, an applicant or certified CDFI could have to complete more than the abbreviated TLR if they are a regulated entity that has consumer loans to report in the consumer loan TLR, financial services in the financial services TLR, or loan purchases in the loan purchases TLR. Certain entities may complete all 4 components, so please budget your time accordingly when you start to complete the TLR. The fund has advised organizations in the past to start at least 1 month before your TLR submission is due. Next slide. In regard to the TLR submission process, this slide focuses on the abbreviated TLR and its relationship to the certification application. First, applicants will open up an abbreviated TLR in AMIS, either by directly entering the information through the AMIS user interface, this is also called the manual way, or downloading a CSV, XMD, or XML or XSD template file, where an applicant can enter all of their transactions outside of AMIS, and then later upload the completed template into AMIS. After an applicant has entered or uploaded all of their transactions into AMIS, the organization should run the target market calculator to check and see if the TLR information meets the required target market percentage benchmarks for the applicant's proposed target market component. For the majority of applicants, it is a question of whether the target market calculator reports that your organization has at least 60% of its financial product activity and number of transactions and dollar volume in its proposed target market. Failure to meet the required target market thresholds means that an organization will not be allowed to submit its certification application. The abbreviated TLR should then be certified and submitted before the CDFI certification application is submitted. Next slide. Oh, sorry, still on the slide. Just to reiterate, applicants must report on all origination activity for their most recently completed fiscal year prior to the submission of their CDFI certification application. For example, if an organization's fiscal year end is December 31st and the deadline to submit their certification application is December 20th, 2024, then the TLR should reflect the origination activity from January 1st, 2023 to December 31st, 2023. TLR submissions are subject to review by CDFI fund staff. So there may be an application where the target market calculator said an applicant was at or above 60% for target market activity, but the review by the CDFI fund staff after the application submission results in the percentage being less than 60%. Additionally, where the CDFI fund has determined that the applicant does not have sufficient accountability to a proposed target market or target market component, the related target market transactions will be excluded to see if the applicant still meets the target market threshold. In these instances, the organization will not be approved for CDFI certification. Next slide. The submission of the TLR is not just a requirement for applying to become certified or complying with the Financial Assistance Award. It is also now an annual requirement as part of the Annual Certification and Data Collection Report, also known as the ACR submission process. It will be used by the fund to assess annual compliance with target market activity thresholds. CDFIs will no longer just attest to the fact that they are meeting their required target market activity thresholds to their approved target market. Now the submission of the TLR with their ACR will provide the necessary evidence. Similar to the certification application, the type of TLR that is submitted with their ACR varies based on whether a certified CDFI has an active assistance agreement for a financial assistance award from either the CDFI program, NACA program, CDFI RRP, or CDFI ERP. If there is an active assistance agreement for the programs that were just named, then the certified CDFI completes the full-length TLR. Otherwise, they complete the abbreviated TLR. The submission schedule is tied to either a certified CDFI fiscal year end or the submission calendar outlined in their assistance agreement. To repeat what I said during the certification application process, TLR submissions are subject to review by CDFI fund staff. So there may be an ACR where the target market calculator said a certified CDFI was at or above 60% for target market activity, but the subsequent review after the ACR has been submitted by the CDFI fund staff results in the percentage being less than 60%. Additionally, where the CDFI fund has determined that certified CDFI does not have sufficient accountability to an improved target market or target market component, the related target market transactions will be excluded to see if the certified CDFI still meets the target market threshold. In these instances, the organization will not have its CDFI certification reaffirmed. Next slide. The previous slide concluded the changes to the TLR, so we will now discuss the annual certification and data collection report, also known as the ACR. Since it was introduced by the fund in 2016, the ACR has been used by the fund to determine whether certified CDFIs continue to meet the 7 requirements of certification on an annual basis. Besides its use to assess compliance with certification requirements, the ACR is also used to gather data that allows the fund to track trends in the CDFI industry. The ACR is submitted via AMIS and currently consists of 4 sections. Next slide. The 4 sections cover certification requirements, development services activities, financial performance, and financial products portfolio. The new version of the ACR, released in conjunction with the revised CDFI application and policies, adds 3 new sections to the annual form. In addition, the new ACR gives certified CDFIs the opportunity to seek approval for eligibility determination of a new similar financing product as an eligible financial product, a new similar financing service as an eligible financial service, amend standards for responsible financing practices, add to the major uses of assets and or staff time that can be disregarded or included, add in other targeted populations, or use an alternative or amended target market assessment methodology, similar to what they are able to present in the certification application. Next slide. The first new section in the ACR applicable to everyone is the sources of investment capital, which has 11 data fields shown on the slide, so I will not go through each one. Certified CDFIs will have to complete the table for at least one investment source before they can submit their ACR. The objective is to gather important data on how CDFIs capitalize themselves. The table is derived from the discontinued institution level report, which was known as the ILR, and document sources of capitalization. So for those of you who have been around long enough with certified CDFIs to remember completing the former institution level report, this table builds off a question from that form. A frequent question asked of the fund is, where do certified CDFIs source their capital from? So the completion of this table will allow us to track this information for the industry. Next slide. The next new section is the contributing operating revenue table. This table has only 4 data fields to complete, depending on how many different types of donors that a CDFI has for its contributing operating revenue. The objective is to gather important data on how CDFIs manage their operating revenues. This table, similar to the previous table, derives from the discontinued ILR and documents the sources of operating revenue. Reporting entities will be required to have at least one entry in the table before they can submit their ACR. This is another piece of information that the fund is asked about and will now track for the industry. Next slide. The final new section is the loans and leases table. The objective is to gather important data on the average rate, interest rates, total number, and amounts of loans and lines of credit provided by certified CDFIs. This table varies by financial institution type. Banks will see different types of loans or leases than credit unions, loan funds, and so on. To reduce reporting burden for certain financial institution types, the fund will use federal regulator call report data to populate select data points. Certified CDFIs must have at least one entry in the table in order to be able to submit their ACR. Next slide. Another change to the ACR under the revised certification policies is its submission deadline. Currently, the ACR is due 90 days, roughly 3 months after a certified CDFI's most recent fiscal year end. For example, if a certified CDFI's fiscal year end is December 31st, 2023, then its ACR is due on March 31st, 2024. Because the TLR is now a requirement of the ACR submission, we have lengthened the ACR submission deadline to 180 days, roughly 6 months, after a certified CDFI's most recent fiscal year end in order to align the TLR deadline. Turning back to our December 31st, 2023 fiscal year end example, the new ACR would then be due on June 30th, 2024. It is important to note that the new ACR deadline does not, I repeat, does not take effect until a CDFI applicant or currently certified CDFI is approved for certification under the revised certification policies. Until then, the ACR submission deadline remains at 90 days after your most recently completed fiscal year end, unless the CDFI fund informs an organization otherwise. So please refer to your ACR reporting schedule and the certification section of your AMIS org page for your organization's specific deadline. Next slide. In an effort to reduce reporting burden and take advantage of other existing data collections, the fund is increasing its use of call report data from federal regulators in the new version of the ACR. Certified CDFIs will be required to continue to review and attest to the accuracy of the data populated from the regulator call report, as well as inform the fund when the populated numbers are incorrect. The fund only populates those data fields that are shown to be matches to the fund's definition and guidance from the regulator data. Next slide. For existing data fields, the fund has decided to make a number of formally optional data fields required. These data fields factor into the fund's risk assessment review of certified CDFIs. The fund is also making use of information collected in other fund reporting tools to populate existing fields, such as using the TLR data to populate primary and secondary lines of business. As has been previously mentioned, the target market activity questions are now being confirmed via TLR results rather than solely based on attestation. Next slide. There are also a number of new data fields or sections in order to align the ACR with the revised certification policy, so the ACR can better assess whether certified CDFIs are complying with the requirements. To better track the number of CDFIs who are minority depository institutions as defined by the FDIC or NCUA, we have added an MDI data field. Certified CDFIs are responsible for making sure that this data field accurately reflects their MDI status. CDFIs will report annually on the demographic makeup of their governing leadership and executive level staff. These data fields will allow the fund to see if there has been any changes since their certification application was submitted and approved. Data fields have been added to clarify what activity belongs to the parent organization versus affiliates versus spin-off entities. The primary mission subsection has been expanded. And finally, there is a new responsible financing practices subsection, building off of the questions in the certification application, plus a new section for tracking a certified CDFI's designation as a Native American CDFI. Next slide. The fund recognizes that the transaction level reporting requirement and other changes to the TLR and ACR do increase reporting burden for many CDFIs. However, the fund sees significant benefits for both the CDFI fund and the CDFI industry to this additional level of reporting, including an improved ability to determine where there are gaps in CDFI financing, both in terms of geography and product type, through the universal submission of transaction level reporting. increased ability to measure compliance with CDFI certification requirements, and maintain the high standards that the fund sets in order to be a certified CDFI is another benefit. Last but not least, these information collection efforts provide a more complete picture of CDFI industry, which can hopefully lead to new and additional investment in CDFIs and therefore the communities they serve. Next slide. We will now go over additional information to assist you all in completing your certification application and related tools. Next slide. The CDFI certification act was in AMOS on December 21st, 2023. At this time, only new organizations can apply for CDFI certification. To apply for early reapplication, currently certified CDFIs must notify the CDFI fund of their intent to submit an early reapplication no later than February 1st, 2024. Slots are limited to 700 CDFIs, and as of right now, approximately 500 slots are still available. CDFIs that apply early for recertification and are not recertified may submit another application before the end of the grace period, which is December 20th, 2024, if it feels that it can fix any issues identified in the early submission application. We will resume the CDFI certification monthly conference calls in February, where we'll be providing information and responding to questions live. The ACR quarterly conference call series will resume in March. To support applicants, we will continue to hold webinars throughout the first half of 2024, including another one next week on Wednesday, January 31st at 1:30 Eastern Time. And the topic is the CDFI certification application overview. Be on the lookout for additional webinar announcements. We will also be releasing additional guidance materials over the coming weeks. Next slide. As always, the CDFI Fund is here to provide information and support you on the CDFI certification journey. You may reach out to the CDFI Fund for additional information regarding the CDFI certification application, ACR, TLR, or any AMOS-related issue using the contact information shown in the slide. We thank you for participating in this call today. We look forward to serving you. We'll now check to see questions that have come through the chat that we will respond to. Remember to also submit your questions in AMOS via a service request. The CDFI Fund will continue to update the FAQ document with additional clarifications. So let's get into the questions.
All right, I'm just going to read out some for the benefit of groups that have been answered, and we're looking at the other ones as they come in. So we appreciate your patience. So first question, will these slides be on the CDFI website? The slides actually already are on our website, on our certification page, and the recording will be posted as soon as we can after the conclusion of this call. So that will be up there, and if you have trouble finding it, feel free to reach out and we'll direct you to the right place. We also had a question come in about the new sort of loan purchases table in the TLR, asking if we are required to report on all loan purchases or just those that are eligible. And the answer to that is that all loan purchases should be reported. Those that are directed to your target markets will end up benefiting, your performance on your target market thresholds. Hopefully that clarifies that answer. Feel free to reach out again if you need more information. We also had a question come in about, this is from Raina, I believe, that's asking for kind of clarification on something Shannon was saying in the slides, asking about if you don't meet your target market lending percent in the prior year, are you eligible to apply for certification? Shannon, I don't know if you want to clarify that or if you know specifically what in the slides that might be referring to.
Hey, Erin, I didn't see that. Can you repeat what the question is?
Yeah, so the question is, if you don't meet your target market lending percentage in the prior year, are you able to apply for certification?
So to apply for your certification application, as this is your first, I don't know if this is someone who's their first time or they're currently certified and they're doing a reapplication. What the target market activity that you submit your application beyond will be based on the activity of your prior fiscal year, most recently completed fiscal year. If you do not meet the target market activity requirements, you will not be able to proceed in AMIS and actually submit your application. So it is set up as you make way, you do your TLR, you start seeing there is a requirement that you have to be at. For most folks, it's at 60%. If you're on one of the more unique types of target markets, you have some different percentages, but there is a requirement that you are going to have to show evidence in our target market calculator that you're meeting 60% both in volume and number account in order to be able to even submit the application. And if someone has, if whoever's question that was, if they're still confused or have additional, feel free to submit it through their AMIS service request, so we can also respond more specifically that way as well.
The next question that we got was they submitted their abbreviated TLR and they're waiting for a response, and the application is not yet appearing on AMIS. In order to launch the application, you're going to need to go and run a target market check. You do that by clicking the More drop-down at the bottom. It's on the top right. It's in a banner, in the blue banner. You click on the option that says TLR Import Export Certify. Once you open that link, you're going to see an organization page. You're going to select your organization. Once you've had your organization selected, you hit Next, and it will bring you to the TLR Import Export Certify kind of home page. From there, in the top section, you will see an area. You will see a button that says Run a Target Market Check, and you're going to enter into the free text box the year of 2023. Once you hit to calculate your target market data, you're going to see another window pop up, and it's going to have five target market checks that are running. In order to launch the application, you need to pass all of them except for the last one, which is the designated Native American threshold. And you only need to pass that if you're seeking that designation. Once you pass your target market check, you can go back to you can close the window and you can go to your organization page, and you can it's on the top banner again. You go to organizations, you click on your organization, you navigate to the related page, and then you're going to see your program profiles. Once you're in your program profiles, you're going to see an option for CDFI cert. You click on the program profile name, it has a P hyphen and then the name. From that point, you're going to see 3 buttons and an arrow down at the top below the blue banner, and then you can click Apply for CDFI Certification. If you have any further questions, you can please submit a service request, and I'll be more than happy to send you these instructions in text rather than speaking them.
And I'll respond. I think Mike referred to this a little bit, but the question, I think it's from Marianne here about where's the link for the new TLR. You're only seeing in the AMIS site, CSV file with a date of August 2020. Fortunately, we don't have sometimes control over how our IT names files, but the file that says August 2020, that is the updated full-length TLR template, it has all of the changes that we have been talking about today and described in the guidance is reflected in that template. The abbreviated TLR has its own separate template that has abbreviated TLR in its name, but the August 2021 is the most current TLR full-length version that you would use to complete. And then there was the question that I think it's from Sue Duncan on the ERP assistance agreement. So the questions on ERP. We are still in the process of coming out with our more guidance related to ERP. So I would just stay tuned on that piece. But as I did say, a full-length TLR, yes, there will be that requirement for ERP, but we will be having guidance come out shortly that will explain to you the additional information on that requirement.
There's another question in chat. It says, for new CDFI applications, is it required to upload the new CDFI TLR address report in addition to the TLR report? The answer to that is yes. If you're a non-regulated entity and you're reporting your transactions for the TLR for consumer loans, you're going to include those in your address report, and anything as a regulated entity for consumer loans will go in your CLR. If you have further questions, please submit a service request.
And I think just another question someone asked about the new markets TLR deadline. So if you're asking your sort of the one that you thought, if you have an upcoming deadline you thought that was going to be January 31st, we're actually in the process of extending that deadline to the end of February. So you should be receiving notice for that extension in your AMIS account shortly this week or next week. But that has been, the new markets TLR deadline has been extended again because we have not yet been able to release the updated new markets TLR templates.
I'm going to jump in and try to answer a question that came in from Darlene that says, if our original due date for submission of the TLR report was on 12/31, is the new date now 1/31/24 with the new abbreviated TLR? So if you had a TLR deadline that was based on your FA or RRP award this year for FY23, you're not going to be doing the abbreviated TLR because you're under an awardee TLR requirement. So you're going to do the full-length TLR, which looks a lot like it used to look with a few additional changes that Shannon went over. So if you're an awardee under FA or RRP reporting obligations for FY23, you shouldn't be submitting abbreviated TLR. You should be submitting full-length TLR. If you do that via manual submission, you'll see a full-length TLR option. If you're someone who does a bulk upload, you'll see those templates, and they'll have a suffix of August 2020, but you'll notice they don't say abbreviated TLR. So you'll continue to do your full-length TLR if you are an FA or RRP awardee with FY23 reporting requirements. Depending on, let's see, so you may have had your due date extended to 1/31/24 if you're one of those awardees. So stay tuned for any information around that, but you'll continue to do full-length TLR in that case.
There's another question that's come in about clarifying the steps about adjusting the ACR submission date from 60 days to 180 days. So that submission date extension does not happen until you submit if you're a currently certified CDFI, you come in and you complete your certification application and you are then recertified. Based on that, then your ACR deadline adjusts to 180 days, and your ACR then has a TLR requirement with it. And we will look to see timing lined up. So right now, everyone who's a currently certified CDFI, you should be sticking to, when we populated your reporting schedules in the beginning of December, we kept you at a 90-day submission deadline because we do not know when folks are coming in and going to be submitting their certification and application, everything. So you would stick to the deadline you see there, so it's 90 days. So right now, you're just submitting your ACR as you have done before. It does not have a TLR requirement with it. And you answer the questions based on, how you have been answering them in the past, and you'd be completing it based on your most recently completed fiscal year activity. So that stays at 90 days. And so I just want to confirm that. So for most folks, the majority of currently certified CDFIs have an FYE of December 31st. So December 31st, 2023 ended your fiscal year. You should then have your ACR submitted to us by March 31st, 2024, and it is the same ACR you have been completing. There is no TLR component with it at this point in time until you are recertified under the new certification application.
So a question came in from Jed. He's asking, where do I find my CDFI assistance agreement? So if you are an awardee, there will be a PDF of your assistance agreement in AMIS. You should be able to find it under your award record. And so if you navigate into AMIS and you click on your awards tab, under there will be a PDF of your assistance agreement. And if you struggle to find it, feel free to reach out with service requests. We'll get right back to you. In the assistance agreement, you'll see outlined your reporting schedule if you're an awardee. So you would be able to see, again, in PDF form, like when TLR deadlines are due and things like that. You also should have a reporting schedule element that you can view in AMIS that has the same information that would show information about your TLR and other reports associated with your award.
So I'll respond to a comment I think Don made here about the slides. So the slides that were presented today, for the most part, they actually did come out back on December 7th when we released all of the new certification policies and documents. So they were part of an overview around the changes and everything. The ACR TLR part was not part of the December 13th webinar that came out, which also has its own slides. So these slides will get posted, as was mentioned before, but these slides have been released before as part of what we released on December 7th, with some minor adjustments, like, for example, the additional information section has now been updated to reflect sort of what has happened since that release. Okay, also for those folks who may have been trying to work from the AMIS guidance documents for the TLR that are up currently in our reporting section where you normally have been going, we're in the process of getting new guidance up with all of the data fields have been out as part of the data point collection, but we will be having updated AMIS screenshots and things of an updated guidance document that will show you how to walk through for the abbreviated TLR, how to walk through for the full length. We just had a few technical tweaks we had to make this week, but they should be posted before the end of this week for folks to work from there. I would also say if you are an entity who has a TLR submission deadline right now of January 31st, we have extended that. Notices have been going out through AMIS. So if you haven't gotten one yet, it is on the way, but that deadline has been extended from January 31st to February 16th for the CDFI, NACA, RRP, TLR, I should say. So I just want to clarify that because the new markets TLR has an extension until February 29th, 2024, but the CDFI, NACA, RRP, TLR has an extension from January 31st right now to February 16th of 2024. Okay, Mary Ann, to answer your question, yes. Once an entity submits their ACR at the end of March, that ACR is still under the, I would say, the previous certification policies that did not go into effect in December. So you submit that, it'll get accepted, it'll get reviewed. No one, we have said, will be have its certification terminated based on its answers to that ACR. If you fail to submit that ACR, then that is grounds for termination. So you submit your ACR, you then decide when do you want to come in for your recertification. When do you want to submit that certification application? If you want to come in early, then that's a question of you need to let the fund know by February 1st, submit your request, your request into AMIS, do the service request to say, I want to be an early submission. Then you have the opportunity from May 31st to July 31st to then submit your certification application, your recertification application with a TLR. And as I said, if you do not have an active award agreement with a TLR requirement, then your TLR would be an abbreviated TLR you would be submitting with that application. The fund will then review that application, make a decision. If your certification has been reaffirmed, then your ACR deadline will then be you'll then be on a schedule where your ACR is then due 180 days after your fiscal year end, and that ACR will then have a TLR requirement with it. If you decide that you don't want to come in for early recertification or the slots are all gone, then your deadline to resubmit is any time between August 1st and December 20th of 2024. You then have to get your recertification application in and your TLR, abbreviated TLR if it's applicable, or your full-length TLR if it's applicable, in by that time period. The fund will then review those applications that come in, and we have stated our aim is to then be able to make a decision on them by December of 2025. Hopefully that clears it up. If not, feel free to add another question to the chat.
There's a question in chat. It says, can you clarify guidance for how to record purchases from CDFIs if we don't have OTP CDFI as an approved target market? So it's my understanding, and somebody can jump in if I'm wrong, you don't need to add the OTP CDFI as a approved target market to count towards your target market threshold. It will count regardless, and it doesn't need to be added to your target markets that you're pursuing.
Okay, and I guess someone had a question saying there were only 5 spots left for submitting the application early. No, there's 500 spots, folks. So out of the 700 we had, it's now, we've got, 200 have been taken, so there's roughly 500 left if folks want to jump on those and let us know by February 1st if they want to. It's not I will say it's not a commitment. So if you end up getting started and you realize you can't make it, it's okay. We can't reassign that slot to someone else, but it's okay if you're not able to make that early part. Then you just have to get the application then submitted sometime between August 1st and, at the latest, December 20th of this year.
There's another question in chat. Are you able to pull TLR information that has been inputted into an Excel sheet? That's correct. If you go to the TLR Import Export Certify page, you will see templates that are CSV files, and you can go ahead and download the files and fill out the information there. You can also use an XML file if you're using a third party that provides the information for you that way. And the template for the application is going to be called new abbreviated TLR.CSV, and it's worth noting that any entry within your TLR must also show up in the new CDFI TLR address August 2020 file.
This question may have already been answered, but I'm going to answer it again just in case. I've got a question that do the expanded TLR requirements for award recipients take place after the organization has been recertified under the new program requirements, similar to the ACR requirements? If I'm understanding this correctly, anytime you have a TLR requirement due for an award, regardless of your certification status. And when I say award in that case, right now I'm meaning like an RRP award, an FA award, an ERP award that has a TLR requirement for that year that you're submitting data for, you'd be using the full-length TLR. So it's not going to be, if you're an awardee under those programs, it's not going to be about your certification status or which one you use. It's going to be about your award reporting requirements. And those award reporting requirements for FA and RRP are going to require a full-length TLR. And if anyone's confused about that, like what TLR do I submit, go ahead and shoot us a service request and we'll get back to you and make sure you're on the right track.
Okay, there's a question someone asked about the advantages to submitting your application or your certification application early. I would say one of the largest advantages is if you're uncertain about your application, some part in there about your activity or what you're doing, that the fund will approve it. This is a chance for you can submit it, get it reviewed, and if you end up, there's a part of it that gets rejected and you understand why it's rejected and you have time to correct it as such. For example, maybe it's a board member or something that you incorrectly identified or can replace with someone else. Then you have a decision, and then there's still time for you to then be able to get another application submitted before the December deadline. So I would say that's one of the major advantages if you do come in, is sort of you do kind of have two bites at the apple there for your application.
There's a question in chat. To calculate target market data for an organization with the fiscal year end of 9/30, would the organization need to upload the TLR data prior to calculating the target market data? The answer to that is yes.
Okay, so someone asked a question about they've started the ACR prior to them completing the TLR. So right now there is, and they're wondering, will the data transfer over to the ACR while it's open and the ACR hasn't been submitted. So right now there is no connection between the ACR and the TLR. The ACR currently does not have any TLR requirement for it, connected to it. So for the ACR that's currently open right now and that is on you all's reporting schedules, there's a target market section that's there. That is still self-attestation for you all to tell us, yes, my activity for this past fiscal year, I'm still meeting the 60%, or if you say, no, I'm not meeting the 60%, you provide us with an explanation. There's no TLR being connected to the ACR right now. Under the new, once you come back in for recertification, you submit the application, certification application, to come under now the new certification policies that went into effect in December. And then you will have an ACR requirement there with the TLR. At that point, then there will be a connection between the ACR and the TLR, and you will do the TLR first. You will run it, your target market calculator and everything there, and then its information will then get pulled into the ACR to let us then know that, yes, you are, these are your numbers, these are how you're meeting the target market. It's similar to what you will experience currently now when you start the TLR first, and then you go in to do the certification application. You will then see those numbers transferred over, your target market percentages transferred over from the target market calculator. You will then see be populated in the certification application. A similar process will happen between the ACR and the TLR, but currently right now, there is no connection between the ACR and the TLR.
All right, I got a question that might be fairly common for certification applicants. I think, Mike, I'm not sure if you read this already, but it's a good reminder. If we open the application now for certification, but we don't actually want to apply until later in the year, is that going to cause a problem? No, not necessarily, but I don't know if Mike or Michelle, you want to add more on that. It's probably a fairly common question.
I was going to say no. Please ensure that you're using the most correct fiscal year-end data for your TLR submission. I think that would probably be the biggest caveat. Michelle, I don't know if you have anything else.
The only thing I think I'll add is that if you intend to do that and wait, I would not necessarily certify the TLR until you're ready to move forward with the application submission, so that, we're ensured that, not just the time frame that you're working within is proper, but also all of your transactions that you want need in there are in there, and there is no need for us to get our IT department involved in any changes that might be necessary.
Yeah, and I would say, as you're adding transaction level data early, feel free to reach out if you're confused about which one to do, abbreviated or full length. But there's no problem with putting in FY23 transaction data, running the calculator, seeing how it looks as you think about a future certification application.
And similar to what Aaron, Mike, and Michelle were saying, I think, Don, you had a question if we need to make changes to the TLR after it's filed. So it'd be a question if it's been certified and submitted. In that case, if you do need to make changes, then it will be through a service. You'll need to submit an AMA service request, and then we'll work with you to understand what changes need to be made and make the adjustments. It's one thing that we will say, there is a part, if you started the application, there's a section where we ask, and I sort of refer to that we've added this into the ACR, where if you're asking for additional eligibility, additional sort of considerations to things related to either financial products, staffing, target market, and things. And if you answer yes to any of those questions, we caution you started your TLR, you then sort of hold off, don't certify it. You answer those questions around these additional considerations that you might need, that you don't know if they will be approved or not. That's an opportunity there. You'll sort of wait for the fund then to get back to you. to let you know, yes, you have the green light to include that, to have kept that in your TLR, or no, you need to remove that from your TLR. And so you will have the ability to do that. But once you have certified it, that is when it raises to a level that any changes we need to make then need to be done through service requests through AMIS to make those adjustments.
Yeah, and if you're somebody who's under an award requirement and we have a couple folks who added FY23 data before the system closed down or things like that. Like if you put in FY23 data and it wasn't using the most updated forms, we'll catch that in our review process and we'll just reach out and work with you to make changes. It's not going to be a problem or negatively impact you. So if you're somebody who, for your FY23 data, we're in a rare situation where you added that early and it wasn't using the updated forms for full length or something like that. We'll be reaching out. You can reach out, but we'll get that resolved. Those changes don't have to happen to like FY22 data. So if you're an awardee that's been reporting for years, FY21, FY22, we're not going to be going back and changing that data to match the full length forms, if that makes sense. If you ever realize, we submitted some TLR data a while back and we now realize that there were some issues that we accidentally omitted loans, you can reach out and we'll work with you to make changes. But once your data is certified, you can't make those changes yourself. So we have a process to do that with you on the back end. And we've got some questions, a few on collective review. For many CDFIs, that won't be relevant, but we'll be answering those questions at a later date.
So I'll just give a time check to folks. There's about 8 minutes left. You guys, I think, are fast and furious entering questions, and we'll see if we can answer them. So just if you have a burning question, I would say type it in now. And so we have a sort of a record for it. And if you don't think about it right now, then you can go back and feel free to submit your question via name of service request, as we've said.
There's also a question about the CDFI certification agreement. We are still intending to implement that, and we have not publicized what the final version of that looks like, and we should be doing that within the next few weeks, so hold on for the release of that.
Okay, there's another question. I guess this is just to clarify for folks. So if your AMIS reporting schedule, for your ACR reporting schedule has an ACR due March 31st of this year, yes, that ACR is still required. We are still requiring entities to submit an ACR while this recertification and process is going on. That ACR is going to pertain to the existing certification policies. You do not come under the new certification policies until you submit the certification application that was released at the beginning of December, which has requirements that if you want to be recertified as a CDFI and you're currently certified, you need to submit that certification application by 11:59 Eastern Time on December 20th of this year.
got a general question too. For folks that are newer, we talk a lot about AMIS and submitting service requests and things like that. If you're new to AMIS and you don't know what that is, don't know how to submit a service request, I'm going to put it in the general chat, but you can go ahead to AMIS, AMIS.cdfifund.gov, and you'll see some manuals there, like our Getting Started Navigating AMIS training manual, to help you create an account for the first time and learn how to do different functions in AMIS. And if you get stuck doing that and are struggling to start, you can contact us at amis@cdfi.treas.gov. So please definitely reach out if you are struggling to get into AMIS and to start these processes.
I think so. One last question, or there might be one, but one came in about, if you have an award that's ending at the end of the year, but you decide you don't want to continue your CDFI certification, are you required to submit a recertification application? There's no requirement for you to submit if you're a currently certified CDFI, for you to submit an application for the new certification. It's only if you want to try to remain certified that you need to submit the certification application. However, if you do have an award, there may be implications for your award if you are no longer certified in terms of compliance and things. So that probably be a question that we will add to our FAQs, but that's more a compliance side part, but I think it would have implications for your compliance side. But there is no requirement for someone who is currently certified to submit the new application if they do not want to remain certified anymore.
Right. I'll just add to that. You could either let us know through AMIS that you plan to relinquish your certification status, and we can know not to look for your application. Or if you don't decide to submit, you wait and you decide late in the time frame to not submit. Again, no penalty. We will obviously just remove you from the certification list of being a certified CDFI. And you can come back in at any time for certification if you would like to do that.
Okay, I'll answer, I think, this one last question. Someone was asking, their TLR is due on March 31st, and they see the template in AMIS. It's the new CDFI TLR project, August 2020. Does this new guidance apply to that CSV? Yes, it does. That CSV now has all of the new data fields, answer options that we have been talking about and discussing today and that were put out in the data point guidance information in December. We haven't released the new guidance on that form. It'll be coming out, as I said, should be coming out by the end of this week. But yes, that template does have that information, and it would pertain to your March 31st deadline. That's partly why we have been extending those deadlines for folks, because for this reporting year on the TLRs, we want to have consistent information across the board for the TLR submissions. Okay, we're at 2:59. I don't know, team, is there one last question that folks want to respond to? There have been a couple questions that have asked about CMS and new market tax credits and how that pertains with the certification application. So historically, CMS and new markets have been excluded from the TLR submissions for the awards. And so we will be coming out with further guidance on how that will apply and pertain to certification application and meeting target market percentages. So just stay tuned for that. Okay, well, everyone, we are 3 o'clock hour, so I want to thank you for joining us today and sending your questions, both in the chat and through the Q&A and through AMIS service requests. And we will take these, ones we did not answer today, we will evaluate, and you may see an answer in an FAQ, or if you need a more specific question to your situation, please send us an AMIS service request, as we have been saying, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
This will conclude today's conference. All parties may disconnect at this time.